Get inside of them. Get inside of them. We engage behind the trees on the east in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. East on the golem. East on the golem. East on the golem. East on the golem. Massive, 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 massive.
Hello and welcome. One thing that was requested a lot is a ZVZ meta tier list, and since we didn't really have a lot of meta impacting changes in March with patch 4, I figured instead of just basically reposting the same video, let's do something more interesting and go over the ZVZ meta. If you are interested in an overall meta tier list with regards to Mists, Corrupteds, Hellgates or other stuff, then I suggest you check out the March meta tier list video, link in the description below, because it's still for the most part accurate. The next patch, by the way, is estimated to roll out on the 15th of April. Now, before we get started, a quick disclaimer: you should always follow the builds that are put forward by your callers, whether you're in a guild attending ZVZ or if you're joining an organized group for faction content. The leaders will want a cohesive composition, and they do generally have a game plan. So that would be my number one tip. Don't bring random stuff unless you're given the green light to do so, and just stick to the recommended builds, and at least until you get experienced. If you're new to ZVZs and haven't checked out my old tutorial series on ZVZ, then I highly advise you to check that out. It is old, but the concepts are not outdated and they could still serve to be useful for beginners. These two build pages I'm using throughout the video. This is what my guild uses, and anything else on top will just be my personal feedback or suggestions. The overall Zerg composition at the moment is one main Zerg, and then you have one or more bomb squads. Ranged weapons are performing poorly at the moment and don't really see any play outside of bomb squads, so it's mostly a brawl meta at the moment, and it is very melee heavy. Every party has the usual life curse / damnation, Spirit Hunter, Realmbreaker, Spiked, and Bloodletter, because that's the staple massive pierce and damage setup plus execution. You put in a few tanks, healer, supports, and then you fill the rest DPS with Hellfire hands pretty much. Or if you're PoE and your members are handicapped, you just put everyone on Infernal Sights and hope that's enough to overwhelm the enemy with a number advantage. Okay, but jokes aside, that's pretty much the meta at the moment. If you have the number advantage, you're better off just grabbing Hellfires, Halberds, Demon Fangs, Infernal Sights, whatever, you name it, and just run over the enemy. But to be fair, it is hard to lose if the amount of tanks you have is higher than the disarray buff on the enemy Zerg. Okay, but now let's take a closer look at the parter composition and which roles are common. So for the tanks, you have two playstyles: defensive tank and clump tank. As the name would imply, a clump tank is responsible for clumping enemies up. At the moment, the most popular ways to do it is with a one-handed mace with air compressor, Hand of Justice, or with an earthbound staff. There's pretty much nobody playing Camlin, because it's too easy to counter. As for the defensive tanks, it's a role that has slightly more finesse and grace, as you need to be quick to react and stop enemies from running you over or engaging on you. At the moment, there are two popular options. Heavy Mace and One-Handed Hammer are the most common. Heavy Mace is great in catching and interrupting enemies, or for just peeling for your Zerg. One-Handed Hammer might seem strange, but in the current brawl meta with a short cooldown, high radius stun, pretty good. Grovekeeper as well sometimes sees play as well, especially since the cooldown was lowered recently. Now, if you're not playing open world, if you're playing in castles or in terrace, you will also see Bedrock Mace, which is pretty good. They're not horrible in open world, but they really shine in spots where you have like these chokes, so naturally you see them more in castles. Another option for a defensive tank is Grail Seeker. Fell out of the meta a little bit since the nerfs to diminishing returns on CC, but still viable. A newcomer though, which is very cool, is Staff of Balance. Okay, maybe not that new, but yeah. But some people might think it's weird, but it's basically played for the massive slow it provides. It's like an icicle kind of when you think about it, but you can reposition yourself with where you want the slow to be. Just make sure to turn it off on time so you can actually get healed. Now, obviously, Icicle Staff itself is still viable, but it's hard to say where in the line it falls. Is it a defensive tank, or is it more of a support? Is it a stopper flank tank like a Grail Seeker, hard to say. But one quick note about the Staff of Balance though is it does work pretty well in the current Brawl meta because you can basically dive with it, and the anti-heal does come in handy there as well. Now onto the healer role, which is more of my expert area, I guess. Unfortunately, we don't see anywhere near as much variety. Hellfall is still the go-to healing option, and it's always solid. The mobility is nice. Fallen and Great Holy aren't horrible, but in comparison, they don't quite cut it. Now, Great Holy was buffed recently, but probably still not quite there. Now keep in mind when playing Hellfall though, you don't want to jump in, save your clump, and then you just die instantly afterwards. This is why I highly recommend having something in your build that you can pop right after if you see that more damage might come. Like a random late Hellfire just one-shotting you, for example, that's not fun. So whether you have a Soldier Helmet or a Mistwalker Jacket or Cleric Robe or Blink or Res Spot, like whatever it is, just be careful to not die after jumping in. There are many picks for a Hallowfield build, but for me personally, this is what I would recommend. Limhurst Cape is great to not run out of mana, but if you're playing Leather, then Martlock Cape is also not horrible. You can go with something like Eye of Secrets, or what some people do is they go Royal Cowl with the Aegis offhand. But if you're still struggling, you can opt for Eye of Secrets or for Crab Omelet, whatever it is. Remember, if you're playing any cloth pieces, you can change those to Energetic. You'll have to gauge yourself how mana hungry you are and if you're running out of mana or not. Fey Robe or Robe of Purity can be very useful if used well, but be careful to not overstep and die trying to help peel for your Zerg. Cleric Robe is obviously more standard and the go-to, but as I mentioned, Mistwalker Jacket is not uncommon as a pretty nice and defensive chest piece. I recommend that one on Hallowfall. On the other healing sticks, I would say you're better off going cloth. For helmets, you can go with any hood with cleanse, always solid, or even something like Soldier Helmet if you know how to use it. If your Zerg allows it and you are inexperienced, then Cleric Cowl isn't horrible as a good defensive option. For shoes, you can pick between Mercenary shoes, Cleric sandals, or Stalker shoes. Cleric and Stalker I think is just personal preference, but if you want to cleanse with a dash, then Mercenary shoes isn't bad. I personally don't like it because I like to be able to blink out after jumping in with my E, and with Mercenary shoes you risk being pulled back in as it does interrupt your dash. For example, Golem Wall, it stops your dash. Also the cooldown is slightly longer, so personally I'm a fan of Cleric sandals. It also has access to the energetic passive, which is nice. If you're playing Fallen or Great Holy, then you don't have to worry about it as much since you shouldn't be in a position to get caught by engages anyway, so you can be slightly more greedy with your build. You should be more than okay to go with Cloth, just be careful about random Hellfire solo bombing. For nature healing, you pretty much have two options. You can pick between Blight and Rampant. Nature overall is just nice for topping everyone off and keeping the Zerg healthy. Blight and Rampant are just the best healing output at the moment since Wild Staff fell out of the meta. I don't know if you could even say that it was ever part of the meta, but yeah, personally I would recommend Blight though. Now moving on to the supports. Obviously as a support you are there to support your Zerg, whether it's an offensive support like Damnation or Life Curse, or something defensive like Locus. Either way, if you have a Judicator or a Demon Armor, you need to be quick to react and use it. These are key defensives in helping your Zerg survive, and being too slow to react and dropping a Judy, or using Cleanse or using Guard Rune can result in the death of many people. It goes without saying that Locus has, is, and probably always will be the most core support item for ZVZ. Great Arcane as well, very useful not only for kiting but also for catching enemies. Oathkeepers, very nice and useful as well, not only just for the movement and the shield of the E, but also for having access to Guard Rune, whose usage in fights is crucial. Casting Guard Rune on top of your allies when damage is about to come can not only negate enemy clump tanks, but also stop any extra CC and lower any damage that's incoming. Enigmatic is also a thing, but it doesn't quite cut it in the current meta, so almost nobody runs it anymore, especially since Life Curse just purges the shield and it's useless. Now, while Rootbound Staff is very solid in smaller scale, it is not as broken in large scale ZVZs due to having many other specialized roles. So, like Locust is already there, but yeah, Rootbound Staff is definitely useful. It's still a strong support unit. Occult also sees play, mostly in bomb squads, but sometimes as part of the main Zerg as well. And last but not least, for the defensive supports, we have the one-handed Arcane, and it's mostly played as a stopper against bomb squads. Your role with the one-handed Arcane is basically to locate the enemy bomb squads and try to position accordingly so you can stop them from, well, bombing your Zerg. It seems simple, but it's easy to get lost in the chaos that is ZVZs. You might have to mount up to reposition multiple times in a fight just to not lose track of the enemy bomb squad. It's definitely a tricky role to play at a macro level, but mechanically you just press EQ when you see them run in. Now, for the offensive supports, as I'd like to call it, we have the Life Curse and Damnation for Curse. They are very useful supports, but for the most part they just press Pierce on the clump, so they are slightly less interesting, although keep in mind Life Curse can be used for purging defensively as well, but you don't really look to do that since that's the job of heavy maces and other tanks. Now, another option that some Zergs utilize is carving, obviously Iron Will to make sure you don't get purged, and for the stacks works pretty well as another Pierce. Another option that I personally think is superior to carving due to not needing stacks and the extra utility is Primal Staff. The fear and stun can be very useful not only for the Pierce, but also either to fear enemy supports away or to catch and fear enemy backline towards your Zerg. This is especially useful in the current Brawl meta. Just be careful, as with the recent patch your dash can now be interrupted, so make sure to pop Night Helmet or make sure there's nothing in the way to stop you. It's hard to say if Primal Staff is a tank or a support, but I think it makes sense to label it as a support, similar to carving, but it does have a little bit more utility and some CC. And now we're onto the DPS roles. For this section we will split DPS into 4 different categories: Standard, Brawl, Bomb Squad, and Solo Clappers. Standard is the usual setup you bring in every party. We mentioned this earlier, but pretty much every party consists of the usual Spirit Hunter, Realmbreaker, Spiked, and Bloodletter combo. Spirit Hunter and Realmbreaker are very strong pierces and damage dealers, but they don't stack, so you only bring one of each. Spiked is a massive damage dealer to clumps, and now since they added AoE escalation to it, it's pretty good. Especially good because it helps shred plates, and in the current meta most people play plate or leather, so, and Bloodletter is, well, obviously there to execute targets that drop low. Now, on top of this setup, you also have other damage dealers. The specific weapons can vary by meta, but for the last few months we are in a Hellfire meta, so that's what you're most likely to see. For Brawl, honestly, you can grab almost anything with a Hellion Jacket and just run it like a very smart individual, pressing their buttons for maximum value, overwhelming the enemy with your skill. Infernal Scythe, Halberd, Demon Fang are probably the best at the moment, but honestly, there's a lot of stuff you can play, like Kingmaker, even Great Axe, or, hell, why not just go with Hellfire, because why not? The weapon is busted. Big, uninterruptible damage on a low cooldown with the anti-heal, because why not? Bloodletter is obviously viable, but you don't want too many per party, and Infernal Scythe is slightly better for a more brawly comp. Carrion Color as well, believe it or not, not bad, but like Bloodletter, you don't want too many. With a brawl comp, you want to make sure you have some tanks that can help catch enemies and keep them from kiting. This is especially where Primal Staff shines, as we mentioned earlier. Again, just to clarify, these aren't the only options you can run. These are just most common ones that I see being run nowadays. Clarent, for example, is also very solid for this brawl playstyle, short cooldown, big damage with stacks. Even more damage than pre-nerf actually, because they shifted the damage onto the E with 3 stacks, so it's pretty good, but I just personally haven't seen people run it that much. But yeah, a lot of options for a brawl. Grab your Hellion jacket, Scholar Cowl, Face Skill, Sandals, and just run it like a professional Albion player. Yes. And onto the bomb squads. It honestly depends on the size of it. Anything from a 2 or 3 man Great Arcane plus Brimstone to a 10-man clap party. We will define this as a bomb squad. On the screen you can see a few different possibilities, but it's pretty flexible what you can run, to be honest. Witchwork is the usual setup with Royal Robe. You actually deal a lot of damage, especially with AoE escalation. And by the way, for more info about AoE escalation and what it is, check the description below for more info. I have 2 links. Very useful stuff there. There's a lot of ways though to build a bomb squad, and it honestly depends on how many people you want to put together. But here are 3 setups that I think are viable. The first is a 3-man Great Arcane and 2 Brimstones combo. This could also be done with 2 people instead, 1 Great Arcane and 1 Brimstone, but it requires very high IP, and most people watching this video won't have the money to burn 8-3 overcharged Brimstones. So yeah, I will warn you though in advance that this requires good coordination to pull off, and people have gotten better at reacting to this combo, either by interrupting your casts or by instantly spam pressing Raspot or Clerical as the freeze runs out, so your timing needs to be perfect. The second variant is a 5-man Witchwork, Permafrost and triple longbow. The staple Witchwork Permafrost combo still works very well, and 3 longbows can absolutely slap on the clump, so this definitely works well. Just make sure you're using Mistwalker Hood so you don't die to the demon armors. You can easily add in a Spirit Hunter or extend this further by adding 1 or 2 support roles, for example Oathkeeper or Occult or both. And that is pretty much what we do with the third and last bomb squad setup variant. Just a quick heads up that once April 15th patch hits, this variant will be a lot weaker since Call of Purity is getting nerfed, so keep that in mind. Perhaps Longbow will replace Wailing completely. But yeah, so the Witchwork is there, but now you have a slightly more robust party composition. You have 2 Pierces with Spirit Hunter and Life Curse. You have supports with Occult, Oathkeeper and Halifol, and then for the DPS you can either go with Clarent or Wailing. The point is to have big damage that has long range. Paired with Call of Purity, you can dish out big damage from far, and this is especially useful in castle or territory fights. Again, there's different ways to build your bomb squad, and it will depend on the players you have available, because in the end you do not want to pull too many people from your main Zerg, but a strong bomb squad is key to applying pressure and wiping many enemies if they don't expect it, or burn defensives on engages from your main Zerg. Another thing that also works well is Eagle. It still deals good damage even though it got nerfed. A quick note on the 4th kind of DPS, that is solo clappers. This is, as the name would imply, someone who sneaks into the enemy Zerg and solo bombs for massive damage. It used to be Gallatin users that did this back in my day. Bridled also, I guess, but it seems like it fell out of the meta. Now, the current flavor of the month, or the past multiple months I suppose, is, as you guessed it, Hellfire Hands. You sneak into the enemy backline with Invis, you press your E, knock with W, and then press Call of Purity, and boom, you probably killed a bunch of people, or at least caused massive chaos in their backline. Then you press Face Skill Sandals because they're balanced, and then you just run away to safety. The knock W is very strong because not only can it make the enemies take an extra bounce from your E, but also if they collide with terrain, they will get pierced. So yeah, at the moment, that is the go-to solo clapping option. Very strong, and you don't even need to go 8-3 to make it work. Honestly, 7-3 and OC, you can cause massive damage. One thing that I didn't do in my previous guides was go over battle mounts at all. And honestly, I think we'll probably leave that for its own video for the future, as this video is already long enough, I think. But yeah, for now you're probably best off asking your guildmates for tips and which battle mounts are the most useful or needed. So that's pretty much it for ZVZs. Even though we went over a lot, I know there's still a lot more left that I didn't mention, but ZVZ is a big topic. There are many roles, many strategies, different colors have different things in mind, and depends on the context. Are you fighting outnumbered, holding a territory, playing open world? So yeah, hopefully though this was useful. I know this was highly requested since the original guides I made, even though this video itself is not a real guide, but more of a meta overview. I still think it can be useful to people who are interested in ZVZs and want to know like what should I spec towards or whatever. Now, if you are playing during the NA timer and are interested in joining a strong and coherent Zerg, then I highly recommend applying to my guild, link in the description below. 50 mil PvP fame is the minimum. If you're someone interested in ZVZs, then I highly recommend joining Make Albion Great Again. The content is good, and who knows, maybe you'll make some good friends with the people there. I know I did. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe for more content. Community Discord in the description below. I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you next time.